It was early one afternoon in the summer of 1944. The sun blazed relentlessly. Shinichi Yamamoto, a wooden rifle slung across his shoulder, was marching from the factory where he worked near Kamata Station to the bank of the Tama River as part of the company youth school's military training exercises. A sudden wave of nausea overcame him, and his legs began to give way. Some classmates caught him before he fell. "What's the matter? Are you okay?" It was agony, but Shinichi somehow managed to finish the day's drills. Later, however, he began to cough up blood. Though Shinichi suffered from tuberculosis, he pushed himself to keep working and to take part in his youth school's military training. At times, he even went to work with a 102-degree Fahrenheit fever. His lymph nodes were swollen and his cheeks drawn, but he couldn't afford proper medical treatment. All Shinichi could do was treat himself with the help of a magazine called Health Advisor. But the wartime food shortage made it difficult for him to get to the nutrition he needed. And after a while, his condition forced him to request that he be relieved from physical labor and transferred to clerical duties. At the beginning of 1945, a doctor finally recommended that he enter a sanatorium for tuberculosis patients. It appeared that nothing more could be done for his condition. Around this time, a heavy atmosphere of impending defeat pervaded Japan. Shinichi heard that one of his friends in the junior pilot training corps had lost his life in battle. While his friend had been fighting and dying for his country, he, Shinichi, had been racked by illness, unable to do anything. He felt ashamed. Eventually, the area of Kamata, now a part of Ota Ward, where Shinichi lived, like the rest of Tokyo, became subject to heavy air raids. With a piece of the broken mirror he shared with his eldest brother tucked safely in his pocket, Shinichi would dash for shelter as incendiary bombs fell around him. The air raids put an end to all talk of his entering a sanatorium. The illness of Shinichi's lungs continued to plague him long after the war ended. But what troubled him most in those early post war years was the spiritual emptiness he felt inside. He had been taught to sacrifice himself for the emperor. He believed in his country, but with the war over, all the values he had based his young life on were rendering meaningless. Why did we go to war? Who or what is the emperor? What is meant by the word nation? What is justice? Standing amid the burned out ruins of war, he pondered and agonized over these questions. To find concrete answers, he would have to wait another 2 years until his first encounter with Josei Toda. With a war over the branch of Niigata engineering where Shinichi Yamamoto had been working closed down. He subsequently took a job with a company that manufactured internal combustion engines in Shimamuruko in Kamata Ward, using his earnings to help support his family. The post war food shortage took its toll on Shinichi, who was already ailing. But far more than food, he hungered for knowledge. He wanted to fill the void in his mind and spirit. He decided to attend night school while continuing to work during the day. With permission from the principal of the Toyo Commercial High School in Misakicho, Kanda Ward, Shinichi was admitted as a second year student after taking a simple written test. The following year, 1946, Shinichi's brothers were repatriated, one in January, another in August, and a third in September. With the return of each son, his parents' hopes brightened and the house became livelier. But they still had heard nothing of Kikui, the eldest son. The only information they had was that he had been sent somewhere in southern Asia. Whenever talk of Kiko arose, Shinichi's mother would say brightly, "It's all right, it's all right. I'm sure he'll be home soon and in good shape. He always told us, 'I'll definitely come home alive,' didn't he?" With those optimistic words, she tried desperately to convince herself as well as others. On May 30th, 1947, nearly 2 years after the war, a government official came to their home in Morigasaki, Omoro Ward, now a part of Ota Ward. They had moved here soon after the war to a house that Shinichi's father had previously rented out. With a look of pity, the elderly official handed a document to Shinichi's parents. It was an official announcement of their eldest son's death. His mother politely thanked the man, accepted the document, and then turned away from her family. Sobs racked her body, though she fought hard to hold them back. The report stated that Kiko was killed in action in Burma on January 11th, 1945, at the age of 26. It said nothing of the circumstances surrounding his death. The report also listed his age as 3 years too young. Kiko was 29 in 1945. This discrepancy led the family to hope and pray that the report itself was a mistake. A short while later, however, Kiko's cremated remains were sent to them. Dashing those fleeting hopes, Shinichi imagined that his brother had breathed his last while still carrying his piece of their mother's mirror. Shinichi's mother clutched the case containing Kiko's remains to her bosom for what seemed like an eternity. Shinichi's heart ached to see his mother, who had always been so brave, overcome with grief. One episode in particular illustrates his mother's inner strength. Towards the end of the war, the family's house in Kojiya, Kamata Ward had been designated for demolition to clear a fire break to prevent fires caused by air raids in one sector from immediately engulfing neighboring areas. They were served a compulsory evacuation notice. Faced with no alternative, they decided to have an extra wing built onto a nearby relative's house and move in there. They had just transferred all their things into their new home and were preparing to take up residence the very next day when the air raid started. The new home sustained a direct hit from an incendiary bomb and burned to the ground. All they managed to save was a single storage chest. The next morning, stunned, they sifted through the rubble. All their personal belongings had been reduced to ashes except for the storage chest. Not sure what was inside, everyone turned to it with anticipation. When they opened it, however, they were dumbstruck. All it contained was a set of Japanese dolls, the type displayed once a year during the girls' festival. Lying next to it, almost apologetically, was an umbrella. Other than that, the chest was empty. Shinichi and his younger brother had managed to rescue it from their burning house with much physical effort and at considerable personal risk. Now, seeing the contents, Shinichi felt his energy drain out of him. They all gazed at the dolls with hollow looks of resentment. Then Shinichi's mother said, I bet we'll soon be living in a house where we can display these dolls again. She must have been as disappointed as the rest of the family, but she made an effort to be bright. They were cheered by her resolute spirit and felt a surge of courage. Their laughter rang out across the charred landscape. Burning within her heart was a powerful, indomitable fighting spirit. But the news of her son's death was a traumatic blow for even the usually stout hearted Mrs. Yamamoto. She sat for a long time with her back to them, clasping her son's ashes, her body shaking as she wept inconsolably. This memory of his mother weeping over his brother's death was undeniably etched in Shinichi's mind. His father, meanwhile, seemed to age visibly after receiving news of Kiko's death. 14 years had passed since then. Now, in 1961, Shinichi and his companions recited the sutra and chanted Daimaku with High Priest Nitatsu as he led them in a memorial service before the monument dedicated to fallen soldiers in the Japanese cemetery in Rangoon. Shinichi prayed deeply for the eternal happiness of his brother and all those who had died fighting in Burma. A powerful pledge for enduring peace began to infuse Shinichi's Daimaku. After the memorial service, vividly picturing his brother's face, Shinichi told High Priest Nitatsu, Thank you very much for doing Gongyo with us. We could offer no greater memorial to those who died in the war here in Burma, including my own brother. Shinichi lingered in front of the monument, thinking that human beings must never commit the folly of war. Looking back, however, the 20th century, now almost two-thirds over, had seen a constant succession of wars and revolutions. Wartime Japan had not been the only country whose leaders had manipulated and exploited the people like pawns, telling them that war was in the best interests of their race and nation. Shinichi recalled the words of Immanuel Kant. Act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never as a means only. This fundamental rule, placing the interests of the people first, should be applied without exception to governing a nation. Nevertheless, in wars fought between nations, it is always the ordinary, unknown people who are the victims. This is a frighteningly persevere state of affairs.